I'm John McQuay with 8541 Tactical, and this is Mail Call Mondays, the show that answers your questions about precision rifles, optics, and equipment. Welcome to another Mail Call Mondays, and this Monday we're finally getting around to the after-action report for the 2016 Snipershide Cup. Now, the 2016 Snipershide Cup was shot outside of Colville, Washington on June 24th through the 26th. This was a 2.5-day match. It started Friday, went through Saturday, and then half of the day Sunday. I'm going to go through and talk to you a little bit about what equipment I found very useful at the Snipershide Cup. We'll talk about a couple of the stages that I found really interesting, and some other tips for you guys that may be looking forward to shooting a match like this next year. So first thing is the round count for the actual match. I believe the information that they sent out said bring 350 rounds, which is a huge amount of ammunition for a match like this. That ended up, for the match, I believe I ended up firing about 250 rounds. That's what my round count book says that I fired over the 2.5 days. I didn't do any zeroing on the the Thursday before the match, so 250 would have been actually what I fired during the match. The round count was back down a bit after talking to Frank Golly due to concerns for airline baggage. Most of the airlines will limit the amount of ammunition that you can actually fly with, and unless you know ahead of time and you can pre-stage your ammunition or send it to your hotel room or send it to a drop point near where the match is, flying with that much ammunition is really a pain in the butt. I mean, it is heavy to drag that stuff through the airport to begin with. So the round count was brought down from what it was originally. The format on the stages, most stages had you engaging 3 or 4 targets, and you were engaging each of those targets with 3 rounds. So round counts for each stage that did not have a mover on it usually ended up being somewhere between 9 and 12 rounds. Time limits were about 3 minutes. So you didn't have a ton of time once you got into position to get rounds off, but you also weren't really incredibly crunched. Coming from a standard PRS type format, I found it took me most of the first day to slow down and utilize all of my time instead of trying to crack my shots off as quickly as I could get them off. First thing, let's talk about field match versus PRS match. Now, this was a PRS points match, so I don't want to confuse things a little bit, but PRS matches have kind of a certain flow to them, a certain format. You generally have tighter time limits. Stages are usually about 10-round stages, and it's one of those where you normally already know the range to the targets before the stage starts. It's just a matter of getting in, getting your rifle stable on the barricade, obstacle, whatever you have, getting your shots off, and then being done. The Snipershide Cup is what I consider a true field match. The obstacles that you have at hand are not necessarily man-made obstacles. The terrain, the vegetation around you, the position that you are shooting in, those are generally what become the obstacles. Those are what cause the difficulty on the stage. For instance, on Friday, the first day that we shot the match, we were shooting in a really grassy valley kind of setup, and the vegetation all the way around the firing points was usually about knee deep. So you're shooting in knee deep grass to begin with. So prone is pretty much thrown out completely. There were not a whole lot of stages where you could shoot the entire stage prone. Quite a few on our second 2 days, we could shoot part of the stage prone, but you would have to either start prone and then go to a tripod, or start on a tripod and then go prone. And when I say prone, I'm not talking about bipod closed up prone. Most of the time we were running with bipod fully extended, or I was borrowing a larger bipod because my antlis would not extend far enough to be able to get me high enough to deal with either obstacles in front of the gun or the slant of the hillside. So it truly was a field match. Nature provided a lot of the obstacles. Now there were some where we had to shoot off of either a fence post or a rock pile or something in that nature, where they kind of were engineered obstacles, but most of the time it was just the terrain that was providing obstacles for us. Field matches will start to require you to carry more equipment to address the kind of issues that you're going to see. One of the things that really was almost mandatory at this match was a tripod. And I'll talk about the gear a little bit more detailed here shortly. But I'm going to tell you first off, the hog saddle from Shadow Tech. I've been using one of these for a couple of years now. The hog saddle set up on a Manfrotto tripod. And this is the guy that we used here. The hog saddle set on the Manfrotto tripod really made engagement on some of the stages a whole lot easier. Without the tripod and the hog saddle, some of the stages would have been almost impossible to shoot. I did talk to a couple of competitors out there that said they had a guy in their squad that did it with an ultra tall bipod or did it with a set of shooting sticks. But kudos to him, because I tell you what, trying to make a 1,000-yard shot off of shooting sticks, that is really some skill there. A 1,000-yard shot off of a super tall bipod is, less difficult comparatively to a regular prone shot, as long as you can get that rear bag in there, as long as you can get that rear support really anchored in. But the tripod just really made for a very versatile tool. And the cool thing about the hog saddle, and we're not going to make this a hog saddle review or a hog saddle advertisement, but the cool thing about it is it can adjust to fit a very wide variety of guns. And we were doing a lot of equipment sharing out there in a lot of creativity in setting up our gear. So there were some times when a shooter would go up and we would be using two tripods, one on the front and one on the back. And hog saddle makes it really, really easy to drop a beanbag into it and then set the gun's buttstock on top of the hog saddle and use it as a rear support. The clamping feature allows you to fit my AI forend, wide butt stocks, etc. Pretty much any gun that I have currently will fit in a hog saddle. And then finally, it was really cool because you can set your laser rangefinder on it and get a nice stable base to get a range on a target. When these things are jostling around or where you're trying to hold them by hand, it can sometimes be difficult to get a solid range on that target because you're ranging what the laser is hitting, and if the laser is jumping all around from target to bush to hillside, you're not going to get a solid range on your target. You're going to get a range to everything around the target. So the hog saddle was a great help. Now, when we got to the match, I actually drove out to the match and drove cross country. It was about a 2,000-mile drive. It took me 2.5 days to get out to Washington. I drove out because I knew that I was going to be camping at the range, and I didn't really want to try to fly with all the gear I needed to shoot the match, plus camping gear and all this nonsense. Additionally, driving out allowed me to not have to rent a car when I got out there, and it allowed me to get out there with a vehicle that allowed me to get anywhere I needed to go. The roads to where we needed to go in the range were dirt roads. A lot of it was potholed. It was driving up the side of a mountain. And then a lot of the driving that we did on Sunday on the, I believe it was Charlie ranges. On the Charlie stages, we were just driving through open cow pasture. So you definitely wanted an all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive vehicle with a little bit of ground clearance to get around out there. So I was able to take our new Subaru Crosstrek out there, and it got great gas mileage out. It carried all the gear I needed to, and it got us around on the ranges out there just fine. So it worked out great. Some people say I'm kind of crazy for driving cross country, but I really prefer driving. I love seeing our country in all its glory. So it's a nice thing for me. Can be a little lonely sometimes since Sarah didn't get a chance to go along with me this time. But overall, it was great fun. So I got out there on Thursday. I did have the opportunity to zero if I wanted to, but my whole idea on it was I had just got done driving a pretty good stretch. I was kind of amped up on caffeine, kind of fatigued from being out on the road. The rifle was functioning perfectly and perfectly zeroed when I put it in the bag and loaded it in the car to get it out there. I didn't really see any reason to mess with the zero or mess with the rifle before the match started. So I went ahead and declined zeroing. That's going to be a judgment call on you when you get to a match. If you want to go check your zero or not. I was hesitant to even check my zero because if I throw a couple of shots, I'm going to be burning more ammo, I'm going to be goofing around with stuff, and then it starts to get into your head and it kind of messes with you psychologically when you get out and you actually fire the first shot on the first stage of the match. So I would rather go into it knowing that my gear was set. And this is an Accuracy International with a Vortex Razor scope on it and a Bobro precision rifle mount. I've never had any zero drift problems with this setup. I've shot it in a few matches. I banged it around a lot. It does just fine without goofing around any. So I'm kind of going down my list of bullet points here in no really discernible order. I'm going to talk about one of the big reasons I wanted to shoot this match. I kind of went out not with the intention to win this match, but I went out with the intention to have fun, get some experience shooting this format of match because I haven't been shooting field matches in a while, and to really socialize with the people that are out there. I love socializing with other shooters. We tend to be a kind of a unique group, and it's really just a fun time. My thing is, though, when I go out and shoot a match, it really doesn't matter what my performance is at the match. I'm still trying to have fun. I'm trying to enjoy being there. There were a couple of stages that I zeroed the stages. I walked away from the stages, maybe having learned something or with an idea in my head of what not to do the next time I go out. But I've learned something, I've taken something away from the stage, so it's still a win as far as my overall career shooting. If you come away from a stage and you zeroed it and you didn't learn anything, that's not a good thing. But even worse is to do horribly on a stage and then show your ass. Complaining, blaming the ROs, complaining about this, complaining about that, throwing gear down, breaking gear, just generally acting poorly. If you are just a regular shooter there for the match, it reflects poorly on you as an individual. If you are a sponsored shooter and you act like this, it reflects poorly on everyone that is on your jersey. Every single one of those companies, it reflects poorly on them for supporting you and you acting that way. There was only really one instance out there, or one individual that I saw that exhibited extremely poor sportsmanship. He blamed a variety of factors for his performance and really acted poorly towards other personnel that were out there on the range. So all I'm going to say on that is don't be that guy. Show up, have fun. If you do bad, you do bad. Fix it the next time. Try to learn something from it. If you have equipment issues, figure out why. Fix it, go on. When we're shooting competitions, it's not a life or death situation. So if you have a bad match, you have a bad match. What says more about you as an individual is how you conduct yourself when you have an absolutely horrible match. So again, don't be that guy. Everyone will laugh at you. Everyone will make internet posts about you. Everyone will make private jokes about you because there is no end of jokes about the performances that I saw from one individual out at this Snipershide Cup. Other than that, All the guys that were in my squad were absolutely awesome. We had a ton of fun. Now, the Cup has been criticized in some of the posts online, some of the pictures that were put up, as being a gear match. Well, it is gear intensive because of the manner the stages were shot. Most of the stages, when you showed up, the ROs would point out where the targets were located at. That's the only information that you got. You knew where the targets were, you knew where you had to be to shoot the targets. Everything else about your firing solution you had to come up with. So you had to come up with your range to the target. You had to figure out how you were getting engaged the targets. Some of the stages had a specific order the ROs wanted you to engage the targets in, and that was more of an administrative thing because they wanted to be able to get on the correct spotting scope, or they needed the time to swing their spotting scope onto the next target, and it was to eliminate confusion. But actually figuring out the range to the targets, we didn't get the range to the targets on any of the stages. You had to laze the targets yourself and figure out the range to them. And lasing the targets was really the only way to learn the range to them. You were not given the size of the targets, and you were not given the time to be able to get on the rifle scope and use the mill relation formula and actually compute your range to them. So laser rangefinders were pretty much absolutely necessary. Now, if you're a guy that either you can't afford a good laser rangefinder that can get you out to 1,200 yards, or you just don't have that gear, I would still say sign up for this match and go out and shoot it. There were no limitations to talking to each other within the squad, and I don't know that there was a single squad that would not be willing to let another shooter borrow gear for their turn on that stage. Everybody in my squad, to some extent, borrowed a piece of gear from another guy. Sometimes it was because you didn't have enough in situations where we wanted to use more than one tripod to shoot a stage. Sometimes it was situations where the gear that you brought was inadequate. For instance, we had at least 2 stages where my Bushnell Elite Arc 1600 would not range the farthest target on the stage. And I either had to get a range off of somebody else, or I had to borrow either the Terrapin or the Sig Kilo that was also in our squad to verify or to actually get a range on the far target. The 1600 ARC did great for the vast majority of targets, up to about 1,100 yards. Shooting targets further than that may have had brush partially obscuring them was made a little bit too difficult, even with a stable rest, for this rangefinder. One of the other guys out there had the new Bushnell Elite laser rangefinder, and he was having no problems at all except for the very farthest targets. So the next generation of these worked great for extended targets. This one worked fine out to about 1,100. Again, in field conditions where you're trying to hit sub-man-sized targets in brush. But the stuff like the tripods, rear bags, rangefinder, that was the core things that you needed. Other than that, it's really up to you on what you brought. I would say going into this match, you really want to try to show up with a tripod, a saddle, or a mount to mount the tripod on the bottom of your rifle, a bipod, a rear bag, and a great attitude. Other than that, you can see what works, you can borrow gear from other shooters, and you should be good to go. So don't worry about it being a gear match. There is some stuff that you need to bring, but it's a good time, and everybody out there that I saw was willing to let new shooters or less experienced shooters borrow gear to be able to successfully accomplish the stage. I'm going to talk about the Loophole stage really quickly here. There was one stage that caused a lot of controversy, and it was called the Loophole stage. And a loophole is an aperture in a intermediate barrier that you need to shoot through to engage targets beyond the aperture. So if you picture a shooter in position and then move out about 25 yards and have a barrier at 25 yards with a hole in it, and I believe the hole that we were shooting through was about 8 inches or so, and then beyond that hole there were 3 targets. I believe it was 200, 300, and 400, somewhere in that range. I don't recall offhand because I've since purged the actual range data to it, but they were somewhere in that vicinity. The Loophole stage caused a great deal of dissent and some creative solutions to it, because it was set up originally prior to the first day of shooting. Day 1 of the Cup was just really horrendous rain. We had a lot of rain, we had a good deal of wind up on some of the hills, and so the knee-high grass beyond the Loophole, I believe because of the rain and because of the wind, was laying down a little bit. The wind definitely allowed it to move around a little bit, and when you got into position to shoot the nearest targets that were down in a little bit of a defilade, the grass moving and the grass low, I believe, allowed you to see those targets a little bit better. When my squad rolled up to shoot it on the second day, we had bright sun, we did not have a whole lot of wind, and when you dropped down and you sighted through the Loophole, the first 2 targets were almost totally obscured by the grass. Some shooters said that they could see a little bit of a dark shadow, a dark spot, and if you shot for the center of the dark spot, then you might hit a target. Some guys sat up and attempted it and timed out doing that. Some guys totally avoided shooting those at all. The trick with the Loophole stage is you had to set up so that your bullet passed through the aperture and did not nick the side. The aperture was circle cut in a piece of cardboard, and the cardboard was marked off, so if you clipped the cardboard, you zeroed the stage. So you had to make sure that your bullet passed through the cardboard, and you had to be able to actually see your targets. There's not a lot of magic to shooting loopholes. There is a loophole formula out there if you want to go out and research that a little bit more, but without getting into math that would blow your mind, the easiest way to shoot a loophole is simply to make sure that your target is visible through your scope as high in the loophole as you can get it. That gives you the most distance between your line of sight and your line of bore to get the bullet through. So that's going to put your bullet as high in the aperture as you can possibly be while still being able to see the target. And on a 25-yard loophole, that works just fine. The trick was then is you would have to move your position in order to see all the targets, because the first 2 targets were fairly low and the third target was higher up on the hill. Well, when it was my turn to get up there, I had to shoot it from a tripod because the aperture was high enough and the grass was high enough you couldn't really shoot it from prone. I got on target. I really could not see the bottom target, so the plan was basically to just worry about engaging the farthest target, take my 3 hits on the farthest target that I could see very clearly, and walk away with a third of the points that were available on the stage instead of timing out or nicking the loophole and getting 0 points. There was a trick to this though, because you couldn't just go up and skip the first 2 targets because the stage is timed. And obviously, if you were to use 3 minutes to shoot 3 shots on a 400-yard target, easy to get your hits on that 400-yard target. However, you had to engage the targets in order, so closest, middle, and then farthest target, and the farthest one was the only one that I could see. So I actually had to fire 6 shots before I could take my 3 shots on the far target. Well, we as a squad discussed the most common sense approach to this. We all kind of decided that if we got down and we couldn't see the closest targets, the best thing to do would be to fire all 9 shots on the far target. And so it was my time. I got in, couldn't see the close ones, went ahead and dialed in on the far target, and I proceeded to bang that far target 6 times in a row. The guys in my squad behind me were keeping track of it so that I made sure that I only took my 6 sighters and didn't waste a scored shot. The RO, in turn, was watching the target, and as I hit it, he would call, "Hit wrong target, hit wrong target," and he repeated this for 6 shots. And then after my 6th shot, Kenny, one of the guys on my squad, called behind me that the next one's counted, and I put the next 3 shots into the target for score. So I walked away with at least some points. There were at least 1 or 2 shooters that were able to engage the low targets, but I think what happened is as the wind would blow, you would get a little bit of a gap and the weeds would open up, or just the weeds moving back and forth, or the grass moving back and forth, would allow you to see enough of a shadow of targets that you could engage it. So that, I think, was partially luck of the draw. But later on, when we talked to Frank Galley about it, he said that that was really kind of a stage designed to screw with your mind. It was intended to be almost impossible to see those first 2 targets. I don't have a problem with stages that are set up like that are set up to mess with your mind, as long as the level of difficulty is the same across the board for every single shooter that shoots it. I don't know if that was the case because I couldn't get up there and see that stage on the first day. When Carl Taylor of In Motion Targets, who was the RO and host for this, he was the one that actually set the stage up. He came up while we were up there and looked at it, and he said it was set up the same, and it was the same difficulty on the time our squad was there as it was when he initially set it up. So again, at some point you just have to take what you're given and roll with it and make the best out of it. It was a really interesting stage. I think it did mess with a lot of guys because they were trying to go a little bit too in depth into calculating how to shoot through the loophole. Guys that have shot through loopholes before just kind of rolled up, set up, shot it, and went with it. So interesting stage. Probably not my most favorite stage out of the whole match. But interesting nonetheless. Next thing I'm going to talk about is one of the added environmental difficulties that we had shooting the Snipershide Cup. Now again, I said it's a field match. The match was pretty much shot in pasture and grazing land on top of a couple of hillsides overlooking the Columbia River. It was a very, very scenic place to shoot. Love the scenery. It's probably the most scenic match I have ever shot at this point. Just the lush greenery and the beautiful vistas. Once the rain had rolled out on Friday and we got a little bit of sun, and all through Saturday it was just absolutely beautiful. But the one issue with where we're shooting in farmland and cow pasture is there were still cows in the cow pastures. And one of the things they briefed us on in the safety brief on Thursday was there would be cows roaming about. It was each shooter's responsibility not to shoot a cow, and that if you did happen to shoot a cow, that there was a $2,500 price tag attached to each one of those cows. So unless you wanted some really expensive steaks, it was in your best interest not to shoot the cows. So there were some stages where there were cows visible on the stage. There were some stages where cows were moving about on the stage, and there was at least one stage where my squad shot that one of our shooters who had already shot the stage had to run down and shoo cows out of our impact area before we could continue shooting on it. Again, this is kind of back to this whole sportsmanship thing. We had one shooter that wanted to reshoot because the cows interrupted his stage. I was there shooting in the exact same conditions. After they left, our squad rolled up. Our squad shot the stage. There were cows. If I backed my scope out to 5 power, I could see cows in my field of view. If I was on target and dialed up to at least 10 power, there were no cows in my field of view. There were definitely no cows close enough to the target that I was shooting that shooting one was a concern. When you're shooting a field match, you just have to deal with things like that. So the cows were an issue when they totally obscured the targets or when they ran close enough to a target that they could be hit by a slight miss or hit by splatter off the target. But most of the time they were just out there, a piece of the landscape, a piece of the scenery, not something that you had to worry about. No cows were harmed in the shooting of the Snipershide Cup, so we didn't have any fresh steaks to cook on Sunday night, but that's a good thing. Not shooting the livestock definitely raises the possibility that you will be invited back to shoot on that property again. So there were cows out there. They were a totally avoidable and easily dealt with obstacle. The terrain that we were shooting in, again, incredibly scenic. On the first day, we shot Delta and Echo series, which the whole match was broken up into Alpha Bravo, Charlie Delta, and Echo series. Series was basically a half day. It was 5 different stages strung together, and each squad shot 2 series on the first day, 2 series on the second day, and 1 series on the last day, in addition to any stage that you needed to make up that maybe you weren't able to shoot on the first day. So Delta and Echo, pretty much where it was at, it was not drivable to it. You had to do quite a bit of walking. So when I came back and I looked at my activity tracker on my iPhone, over the first day I walked about 3¼ miles. So there's a little bit of walking involved. You're pretty much dragging your gear with you. Whatever you need to shoot the stages, you're taking it with you wherever you need to go. I did make one run back to the car and then back to the stages because we had originally planned to shoot a series, then return to the assembly area for lunch, and then come back and shoot the next series. So I knew I was going to be able to go back to the vehicle, so I just carried enough ammo for the morning series. Because of the weather, we got a really late start, and there were some other technical difficulties with the scoring and with some of the moving targets. So we started several hours late. Since we started so late, most shooters didn't want to stop for lunch. They just wanted to roll on through, and lunch was brought out to the stages. So some of us had to stop, run back and grab ammo. Some of us, because we shot the Delta series, and Echo actually was supposed to have a pistol stage, they had to run back and grab their handguns from the vehicle. Because of the rain and because of the timeline, the pistol stages ended up getting thrown out, but obviously you still need to have enough ammo to shoot your afternoon stages. We ended up on the first day, we shot all the way till about 8 o'clock. It was still light till probably about 9. So we got a ton of shooting done. We got all our stages knocked out because nobody really wanted to walk all the way back up the hill and back out into the woods to shoot those final stages. So we went ahead and got them knocked out and it was good to go. The weather did pose some interesting challenges. Now, when I say we started late because of the weather, it's not because of the rain or because of, cold or anything nonsense like that. There was lightning up on the hill, and when you're carrying these big metal lightning rods, lightning is not a good thing. You really don't want to be on top of a sparsely treed hill with a big metal pole when there's lightning coming down. So there was lightning, there was torrential rain. I mean, it was raining hard. Hard enough that it may have posed some problems actually seeing the targets out at distance. So thankfully, they had planned ahead, and there was a very large pavilion-style tent in the assembly area, and we spent a good deal of time under the tent waiting for the lightning and the rain to roll out. Once the rain dropped down a little bit, we went ahead and went out and went to our respective stages and got started, but pretty much we battled the rain for the entire first day of the match. And that's one of the ways that, the Accuracy International really pulled through. Neither scope nor rifle have any problem shooting in the rain. I've shot this rifle through quite a few downpours before, and I've not had any problems with it in the rain, in the cold, in the dirt, etc. So the gear performed great in the rain. One place that the rain did kind of get me a little bit was the Sidewinder dope card that I have with me. The card would get a little bit wet, and I wasn't able to get the card out of the dope card holder without totally destroying the card. Once I had my data written on here and slid the card in, it was good to go. It was fairly well protected, but because of the exposed area down here, it did seem to leach some water up in there, and eventually the card would start to disintegrate whenever I tugged on it. So something to keep in mind, if you have a pre-made dope card, you probably still want to laminate it. That way it will hold together a little bit longer. For most of the stages, I was writing down my dope as I went, so I was writing kind of a key to remember which targets I was engaging and what the dope to each one of those targets were. When we had a blind stage, and I'll talk about those in a minute, then I had a card that was already set up with all of the ranges out to about 1,200 yards with set up for the specific DA density altitude that I was dealing with for the day. And I would swap that in when I was going into an unknown distance stage. That way I could laze the target, look at the card, dial it on, and then be good to go. Let's go ahead and talk about how some of the stages were set up. Most of the stages, again, you rolled in, you kind of scanned the area, or maybe a squad was shooting in front of us when we came in, so we watch what they're doing and look at the targets that they're shooting at. Then the RO, when it was our turn to get our range brief, they would tell us where the targets were at, how we had to shoot, and then it was our responsibility on the heads-up stages to figure out what our range was to the target, get everything plotted, figure out how we were going to engage the targets with what the terrain gave us. That was the majority of the stages. We had a couple of moving target stages where there was generally a stationary target that we had to shoot either first to start the moving target stage, or there was a group of stationary targets that we had to shoot, and then we would shoot the mover. I like those kind of stages. While we still had to get in there and laze the targets and figure out the distance to them, being able to have a stationary target somewhere in the vicinity of your mover is great, because you can get on that stationary target, and if you bang that stationary that is somewhere in the vicinity of the mover, then you know you've got a pretty good wind call for what's going on at the time. Then when you transition to the mover, all you have to worry about is getting your lead down for the mover. A couple of stages we had just the mover to shoot, so there, either if you missed the stationary and had to move to the mover, or you didn't have a chance to shoot it, you were just shooting the mover. Sometimes it was a little bit of a battle to know, okay, do I not have the lead correct, or is the wind blowing me off target? A couple of the mover stages, we had a really good background. One of the ones that was up on a hillside, we had background behind it, so when you missed the mover, you saw the impact on the hillside and you could adjust based on that. At least one that we had down a valley, the vegetation would just suck your bullets up and you would see no splash whatsoever. That one, I didn't hit the mover at all. I hit the stationary targets, but I couldn't tell if I was in front, if I was behind, if I needed to increase or reduce my lead, or what was going on with that specific one. There were other movers that I cleaned the mover. I hit it every single time. So it's not just my ability to hit movers, it's difficult to get the lead when you really can't see where your bullets are going after you start. So the movers were somewhere around walking speed. They didn't tell us the exact mile per hour that the mover was set to. They were in-motion target movers, and those are fully adjustable for the speed that the mover tracks back and forth. I will talk about the movers here for a minute. We didn't have many problems with the movers on the stages that we went up to. A couple times the movers did go down and they had to go cold and go out and fix them. The movers, where they were set up, oftentimes the mechanisms, the control boxes, the motors, the generators, that kind of stuff was exposed. It was out to where it had the potential to be hit by fire. Additionally, the cables that pulled the mover back and forth were prone to be able to be hit. So you had to be careful on the movers. One of the ways that they tried to limit this is they would put in orange stakes on either side of the mover, and those were limiting stakes. You were not allowed to fire at the mover once it passed those stakes. So it would move back and forth, and in addition to trying to get your lead, you had to try to make sure that you didn't shoot beyond the stake. So sometimes those were a little bit distracting. Sometimes I was in the process of getting ready to break a shot, and just for safety's sake, I had to stop, because if you sent a shot beyond the limiting stakes, then you were DQ'd from the stage. So it was really vitally important that you kept your shots between those. Now, in my opinion, the limiting stakes were a little bit distracting, and I have to wonder if maybe there wasn't a better way to protect the mechanism, maybe with some extra steel targets, paint them a no-shoot color, and put them in front of the pulleys or in front of the motor system, or whatever you need to protect, but protect them with some armored steel instead of putting up limiting stakes. But I don't know, I didn't actually get to go out and see how the targets were set in, so I'm not sure if that was feasible or not. The targets were often in some pretty far off spots, so they may have been trying to limit the amount of stuff that they had to drag out and put in, because some of the target locations were really far out there in the field. Let's talk about the blind stages that I mentioned real quickly. On a blind stage, typically what would happen was when you approach the stage, the ROs would indicate to you that you were not allowed to laze the targets. You could generally glass the targets with something that didn't have a reticle or didn't have range finding capability, no electronics, something of that nature. So you could glass the targets, you could see where the targets were at, but you were not allowed to range them until you were actually on the clock. The ROs would brief how the stage was supposed to go, what targets you were supposed to engage in what order, and then they would start the time when you got on glass or when you put your laser rangefinder to your eyes. So you would then have to range the targets on the clock, develop your firing solution, and engage the targets. And you still only had 3 minutes to engage your 3 or 4 targets depending upon the stage. And that started to get a little tight because you not only had to have a stable position for your rifle, a stable shooting position, you had to have a stable position to range from. And often what that meant is that you would have to engage the target, you would have to break out of your shooting position to laze the next target, you would then have to rebuild your shooting position and engage it. And when I say the next target, the areas that we were shooting in offered for the most part a 180-degree field of fire. So very often you would have a target over here at the 9 o'clock, you would have a target at the 12 o'clock, you would have a target over here at the 3 o'clock, and you would have a different wind call and a different position for each one. So if you were shooting off a tripod, for instance, you would have to swivel the rifle, swivel your body around, or you'd have to pick up the tripod, move the tripod to a different position, get everything set back, and then shoot again. And they were pretty devious in some of the stages where the first target you would be engaging would be up on the top of a hillside, so almost on the ridge of the next hill over. And then you would have to shoot one that would be way down in a valley down in front of you, and then come up and maybe shoot the next one that would be stuck between 2 trees way over here to the next side. And so you really had to quickly move the elevation of your front rest, move the location of your front rest, reset your whatever you're using as a rear rest. So there was a lot going on in those 3 minutes, and when you add ranging those targets and get everything dialed in, it really became interesting. But those stages I really enjoyed, because really that's the true essence of field shooting. You need to figure out how far away that target is. You need to figure out what you need to dial on your scope to hit that target. You need to get everything set up. You need to hit the target, and then you need to find another target to shoot. So those stages were great. Really enjoyed them. There were a couple of them, like I said, that I botched kind of badly. One of them, I believe I zeroed because the first target was the longest target, and while I had the position set up, I had the rifle set up on target, I couldn't get the laser rangefinder to laze the target, and I wasn't quick enough in thought to ask one of the guys behind me to toss me their rangefinder. The target, I believe, when it was all said and done, was in excess of 1,200 yards. So it was a little bit far out for this rangefinder, but the Terrapin or the Kilo would have hit it just fine. That one, I took 3 shots trying to hit the target up on the hill with a range that I am pretty sure was not the correct range. So I probably shot right over top of it. And then the next target was way down in the valley, and I swung on it, just took a guess at what it was, spun it on the turrets, and they called time right as I ripped the shot. It was still a miss, but I think it was a pretty close miss. So that was really the only one of those stages that I zeroed. The rest of them, the targets were within most of the targets were within the abilities of the rangefinder. The last stage that we shot, we did have a problem with it was somewhere beyond 800 yards, I believe, but it was a target that was in a clearing, and you could only see the target between 2 trees, and there was a branch actually obscuring a portion of the target. Out of everyone on our squad, not a single one of us actually hit the target. We had slightly varying ranges to it, but the varying ranges that we all got would have been within the engagement distance or within the danger space of this rifle when it was dialed on to any of those. So set to any of those shoot or distance settings or dope settings, this rifle should have been able to hit that target. So I think what happened was each and every one of us, when we lazed the target, we were lazing the branch or the trees on the close side of the target, and we weren't able to actually punch through the vegetation, punch through the window with the rangefinder, and hit the far target. So even if you're running a high dollar laser rangefinder, you may still run into problems like that, and it's just the name of the game. Because of the way the vegetation was set up, I wasn't even able to spot my impacts to see if I was throwing over top, going underneath, or what have you. But it was an interesting stage nonetheless. That was, I believe, our last stage of the day, and the 1,200 yard, I believe it was around 1,200 yard target, I got all my shots on. There was another 900 plus yard target, I believe, that I got all my shots on. So I was feeling pretty good when we rolled off of that one. But again, we come back to that whole gear thing. Sometimes it's just a matter of having the correct tools to do the job. Could they have given you the ranges to each and every one of those targets? Sure, absolutely. They could have gone out there with a Terrapin or something similar or a higher level laser rangefinder, set it up on a tripod, lazed each and every target from the shooting position, and they could have had a card that says, this is what each of your ranges are, and they could have handed it to you. I think that in the spirit of what this competition was supposed to be, I think that would have taken something away from it. The shooting it with a tripod, having to have a tripod and go out there and shoot it, you didn't have to have a tripod, but I think you would have been foolish to go out and not use a tripod on this match. I think shooting sticks would have been a problem. I think just trying to shoot it with a long bipod would have been a problem. There was at least one stage where being able to set a standing height tripod up was extremely helpful. There was another stage where we were shooting off of a barbed wire fence post where I hooked the legs of my bipod in the barbed wire on the fence post, and we used a hog saddle and the tripod as the rear support, and it was perfectly stable. That was the stage where the other shooter couldn't engage because of the cows. I came one target short of cleaning that stage, and the only reason I didn't clean it was because I really screwed myself in my mind, and instead of concentrating on the proper fundamentals and settling down, I went a little bit too fast and shanked the last shot, and came up 5 points shy of a perfect score on that stage. But without the tripod, that would have been a very, very difficult stage to shoot as accurately as I did. You didn't really need to go out there with a huge number of rear bags or pillows or stuff. The Weebad pump pillow was what I used primarily as a rear bag. Once we were done and came back here and everything, one of my other squad mates sent me an email asking me about it. He used it several times through it. I think that match pushed him over the edge, and I think Joe's going to end up buying one of the pump pillows. But you didn't have to have a ton of stuff. Again, rangefinder, hog saddle, tripod, good rifle, and maybe 1 or 2 rear bags and a bipod, and you would have been able to shoot this match. The stages were mostly 9 to 12 round stages, although there were a good number of 12 round stages. If you had a +2 extension on your AICS magazines, that would have been a really, really great way to justify them. I don't. I was running just plain 10 round AICS magazines, so I had to rely on my +2 holder. I have become a great believer in this little guy, and most of my match rifles now have some version of a round holder on the side. This one's short action precision 2-round holder, and it just velcros to the skins. And to be able to have 2 spare rounds there, and counting my rounds, I knew, okay, I just fired my 10th shot, so on the next one, rack it, leave the bolt open, rip a round off, throw it in, slam it forward, and I'm good to go. It made it extremely, extremely quick. And if you were paying attention to how many rounds you fired, so you didn't drop the hammer on an empty chamber, then it was extremely smooth, extremely quick. It's a great way to get those extra shots off. A +2 round extension on the magazines, that would have been a better solution, but you can't beat the price on this. And even if I ran a +2, I would still run 2 extra rounds on the side here, because occasionally you have malfunctions, occasionally you have jams. I only had one malfunction pretty much the entire match, and that was a self-inflicted malfunction. I wasn't paying attention to what I was doing, and I believe I loaded 11 rounds into my 10-round AICS magazine, which those of you that are familiar with them, you know you can squeeze that 11th round in there. For whatever reason, when I went to run that round forward, I would guess that it didn't have enough room to drop the tail down and allow the nose to follow the ramp, the feed ramp in the rifle. So it just stopped dead, and as hard as I could push, I couldn't get that round to feed. I've never actually had that before. I believe I've had it before where I've had this overloaded with 308s, and I was able to feed the top round, although a little bit more difficultly. But in this case, it did not want to feed at all. So I ended up having to strip the round, knock that top round off, drive it back in, and go. Thankfully, that was a 9-round stage, so I still had enough ammo in the magazine to complete it, but had it been a higher round stage, having that round on the side to be able to throw it in there would have been a great thing. Interestingly enough, I managed to fix the jam, get back on the gun, calm down enough, and clean the stage. So I was very happy about that, and that just goes to show you that when you have a malfunction, get the malfunction cleared, get back in, but then calm down. You may have lost time, you may have lost too much time, and you may not be able to complete it, but you still want to get good hits for the rounds that you fire. So slow down, calm down. So many times we see a shooter that will get a malfunction and that will totally rip him out of his mental bubble, and he won't be able to get back in and do what he needs to do, and they just start banging shots off, and a fast miss gets you no hits at all. It's better to slow down, or get you no points at all. Better to slow down, get your hits, get fewer hits. Fewer hits are more points than more misses. So that was nice to see. I know I'm kind of rambling here. I got kind of out of order on my notes, but really that is about it. Coming away from the Snipershide Cup, I did realize I need to make a few changes in the gear that I take the next time I go out. I talked to Clint from Rifle Sticks while I was out there, because I noticed key thing that I needed was more length in my Atlas bipod. I love the Atlas. It works great. It worked great for most of the times when I needed a bipod, but there were a couple of situations where I had to borrow an oversized Harris bipod from one of the other shooters, and thankfully I was shooting the old AE here that still has a sling stud on the front of it. So I was able to just take his Harris, slap it on here, and roll with it. There was one situation where the Atlas, I actually had to shoot it a little bit lower than I wanted to shoot it, because I didn't have enough leg length to be able to deploy the legs high enough and compensate for the angle of the hillside that I was shooting on. I know that sounds kind of counterintuitive, but if you slide both legs out, then you've got one leg floating in air over here, and the bipod doesn't have enough cant to compensate for it. So you have to shorten your uphill leg to compensate for that. And I had to shorten the uphill leg more than I really wanted to be able to get the uphill shooting position that I needed on the side of the hill. If I had a little bit longer legs, that would have worked a lot better. So going out in the future, I will get the regular Atlas leg extensions, but I'm also anxious to try something new that we've got in from Rifle Sticks, and these are 12-inch bipod extension legs. Now they make them to fit both Atlas and Harris, and it's actually one leg that fits both. Depending upon what leg quick release or quick detached items you get, depends upon which bipod it will fit on. The ones that we have right here are designed to fit on the Atlas bipod, and what we do is we have these little adapters that you actually take the feet off of the Atlas. These adapters snap in, and then they allow me to use the quick couplers on the Atlas feet. I can then use the Atlas feet back in the adapters. I'm sorry, I got that wrong. These the couplers go right into the Atlas legs, and then the adapters go on the Atlas feet. We haven't actually had a chance to get these out in the field yet. I just put them together, and the really cool thing about it is with this whole setup here, the quick couplers, the legs, and the adapters, they are totally reversible either way. So if you're going to shoot a field match and you want to set this up to go out and shoot the field match, you can convert it over and do that. If you want to go back to your stock Atlas setup, it's really easy with just a bullet tip, or I use my little Glock punch here or anything else to pop these out and go right back. However, that's not needed. Once you put the couplers on and you put the adapters back on your Atlas feet, you can snap your Atlas feet in here, or you can snap their own spiked feet in here. They attach, they go in really solidly, and they're good to go. I threw this whole thing together as soon as we got the goodie box from Clint, and I took it out and did some dry firing in my living room with it from the sitting position, and I think this thing is going to be really awesome. It's going to give me a whole lot more options when I need to go into a low kneeling sitting to a high sitting position. So really a cool bit of kit, And once we get some time to work on this and get it out to the range, get some video on it, we'll come back and give you guys a review on that. Next thing, I've already talked about the laser rangefinder. I'm definitely going to need to get a better laser rangefinder. I think that the laser rangefinder that Bushnell includes in the Conx kit, or the Connex kit that we have here, that we're going to be reviewing here soon, that would work a little bit better than the old Elite 1600 ARC. It's strange for me to call this old, but it's now a couple generations old. It still works better than my old Leica. Laser rangefinder technology keeps advancing. Each generation it gets more and more powerful, it gets more affordable for your average shooter. So at this point, I think a laser rangefinder, if you're going to shoot these kind of matches, is really mandatory. However, again, if you are a new shooter and you're getting out there, don't let the lack of a laser rangefinder prevent you from registering for one of these matches. There will be shooters there that will let you use their gear. When I go out to these kind of matches, I am more than happy to let any other shooter use any other piece of gear I have. The only thing I'm kind of sketchy on is my rifle, because your ammo probably won't fit my rifle, and I probably only brought enough ammo for my rifle. But once we're all said and done and the match is completed, I am more than happy to let people burn ammo up through my rifle. But again, the gear thing, come out and shoot it. Other shooters will let you borrow their gear. The last thing that I really need to upgrade is my tripod. Again, the tripod that I used is this guy, which is a Manfrotto 055X PRO B. So it's a 055X Pro B. And it is an aluminum tripod. It will go from pretty much prone position all the way up to higher than most men can stand. Definitely higher than you can get a rifle on it and shoulder it. I've got a ball head on here, and this is a 498 RC2 ball head. And the way I have this guy set up with the ball head, I can either take the hog saddle and I can drop the hog saddle on here, and it locks in nice and tight, or I can have a regular RC2 plate on a spotting scope. I can drop a spotter in here. The Bushnell rangefinders have a 1/4 20 screw hole on the bottom, so I can put one of these on there, and if I wanted to, I could drop my rangefinder on the ball head too. The stages didn't really allow for that. Switching between the hog saddle and the rangefinder would have been a little clumsy had I done that. So again, I just put my hog saddle on top and slapped the rangefinder on top of the hog saddle on the couple of stages where we needed to do that. But it's a possibility, and if you were trying to laze more static targets with an unlimited time range, throwing your laser rangefinder on top of the ball head gives you a much steadier platform to range from. Now the drawbacks are, this thing is incredibly heavy. It's an aluminum tripod. It is a tank. I take this out when I shoot video. I take it out for shooting. I take it out for a broad variety of things. It gets banged around, kicked around. Really durable, but really heavy. I definitely noticed it at the end of the 2.5 days. So one of the big things that I will be upgrading is to a lighter weight tripod. I don't quite know what that is yet, if I'm going to go with a carbon fiber Manfrotto, or if we're going to go for something like the Really Right Stuff tripods. The Really Right Stuff tripods have the advantage of they are now moving into the shooting industry. They are bringing out products that are specific for shooters. There was one of the guys in our squad that was running a Really Right Stuff tripod. I actually got to shoot off of his for one stage, and it's a really stable rig. Accuracy International has some adapters that allow you to snap an AX directly into one of their Arca Swiss compatible ball heads, so you don't have to have extra stuff like the hog saddle. You can snap the rifle right into the ball head, so that's kind of cool. So don't know which direction I'm going to go with that yet, but it's definitely something that I need to lighten up in my gear. As far as other stuff, other support gear that I took, I just brought a backpack, and it was a small Maxpedition Pygmy Falcon backpack. I use it for a lot of range shooting because it's got hooks on the outside or loops on the outside that I can hook my shooting bags to. It's got straps that allow me to carry the tripod. It's got pockets that I can throw water bottles into. And it's middle of the road size, so it makes it difficult for me to throw a ton of crap in it. It's got plenty of room for me to throw rain gear in, but it's not so much that I have to overload it. The disadvantage of it is it has no way to carry the rifle, so most of the time I just threw my rifle over my shoulder at left shoulder arms and carried it that way, and it worked just fine. I almost wish I had taken one of my Everly stock packs. The X3 low drag probably would have worked great for this, but it also would have been a huge soaking wet mess at the end of the first day, and it would have taken considerably longer to dry out than my smaller, lighter weight pack that actually dried out before halfway through the second day. So those are some of the things that you need to keep in mind. A bigger pack usually means you can stuff more crap in it, which means you're lugging more crap around in the field. So a smaller pack really makes you think about what is the minimum that I need. But a pack was definitely mandatory for this, being able to haul your sustainment gear around, because once you left the car, you were pretty much half a day away from the car, and then you got back to the car for lunch, and then again back out for the remainder of the day. So pretty much that was it for the Snipershide Cup. I will go ahead and post at the end of the video the top 10 shooters from the Snipershide Cup. Unfortunately, I was not in the top 10. I came in right about 39th place, so not too terrible out of, I believe it was 148 shooters is what Frank told me overall. We had 148 registered, so not a terrible place. I wish I would have done a little bit better, but I goose-egged too many stages for me to really finish with the front runners. The caliber of shooters that was out there were absolutely top-notch. Ashbury Precision Ordnance, they had a sponsored group of junior shooters out there. Those young men did absolutely fantastic. They were shooting APO 6.5 Creedmoor rifles, and it was great to see them out at that level of match, just having a ton of fun. So great on them. Thanks for APO for sponsoring it. Thanks for Vortex, Loophole. There were really too many sponsors to mention. Also, thank you to Carl Taylor and In Motion Targets. The venue out there was absolutely fantastic, and all of the ROs were fantastic. They did an exceptional job. You have the normal thing where, okay, you know, you get a missed hit here and there, but they had to deal with some really, really ugly weather. They had to deal with a whole lot out there, and that was absolutely great. And a big thank you to B&T Industries. Casey at B&T, they sponsored the grub for each day. So they sponsored 3 different lunches for us, and that's fantastic because when you're out there shooting, sometimes you forget to eat, and when the food shows up, it is a great gift. We had subs and fried chicken on the first day. We had pizza on the second day, and then because of some snafus and that, on the last day, on Sunday, they hadn't originally planned to get us lunch, but they went ahead and got us lunch again. It was fried chicken and party subs, and that held us over until the scores were in and we were able to roll out. We will try to get a list of sponsors posted up here at the end of the video, so you guys can see who had a hand in making this thing run. And thanks again to Frank Golly from Snipershide for making the whole thing happen. Getting 149 shooters, 148 shooters, whatever it was, through 2.5 days of shooting takes a ton of administrative work. And in the end, I think it all came out pretty well. So really enjoyed it. Looking forward to coming back next time. If you guys have any questions about the Snipershide Cup or the gear that I use, please leave them in our comment section down below or send them to us on Facebook or Twitter. If you guys want to read the full extended write-up on the Snipershide Cup, including a little bit more of a breakdown on different stages and whatnot, please check out our write-up on our website, and I will leave that link down below. And until next time, get out and shoot.